I get emails from people all over the world asking me questions about self-enquiry or non-duality to help clarify their path. And I want to read one of those emails to you. The questions were very clear and succinct and get right to the heart of the matter of self-enquiry. So the question goes, Brahmana said the question, who am I, is not meant to get an answer, but rather to dissolve the questioner. Like the metaphor of the stick used to stir the funeral pyre. I responded, yes, the I in the question is the questioner. The I is the doer of questions. Dissolving the questioner, which is I, via the question itself, reveals the answer, which is none other than your very being, yourself. As you ask that question, you can feel a subtle retrace or a retraction of the ego as it obeys itself and goes home to find the answer to the question, who am I? Because in the question itself, the I is the egoic I. And so the ego is asking itself to go home to find the source of itself. And as it moves deeper and deeper within you to find its source, you can follow that with your attention down into your being, where then you cling self-attentively to that. And you could say that this is an experience. This is an experience of dissolving the ego. The form, the finite, is being dissolved into the formless infiniteness of yourself. So there is an experience of that. The experience from going from somebody solid into no thingness. You could also say that this is an experience of going from doing into being. You are crossing some sort of apparent threshold, which we might call the gateless gate, to experience yourself directly. They go on to say, you have told me that when I ask myself, who is this I, and then fill in the blank, the investigation turns the mind from the projection outwards, and the self returns and tastes itself. So let me clarify this question. He's asking, when you ask yourself, who is this I that, and you fill in the blank. Because when you're in self-enquiry, your vasanas are going to be pushing you away from yourself. And so you're going to feel these tendencies within to move away, such as irritation or boredom or restlessness, anything along these lines. So you can ask yourself the question, who is this I that's restless? And the ego will turn within and go home to itself. Who is this I that's bored? Who is this I that's irritated? Again, it's exactly along the same lines as the question, who am I? It's just you're getting much more specific on the vasana that's arising at that time. So you're knocking these vasanas back directly every time you point them out directly with this question, who is this I that thinks? Who is this I that's fill in the blank? You know all the different ways the ego can move you away from yourself. I then go on to answer, yes, the ego I obeys its own command by turning within and goes home to its source, which is yourself. After asking the question, follow the sense of I back to yourself with your attention. This sense of I could be this gradient of experience of the dissolution of ego into the infinite beingness of yourself. The sense of I is very subtle and requires a still body, which is obtained once most of your agitated vasanas have been released or relinquished. Again, it's going to be really hard to experience the subtleness of this draw back into you if your body itself and your mind is really agitated. So that's when you release your vasanas, you release the gross experiences so that you can sit in peace and stillness and capture the experience of this dissolution of ego into self. And then once you're at self, you hold tight, you cling fast to self. And it may take several attempts to understand what this even means, because self is not an object, right? Self is being, it's awareness, it's consciousness. So you're just refamiliarizing yourself with the most familiar experience there is, which is none other than the experience of yourself. They go on to ask, when I ask myself the question, I get no answer. I respond, the answer is an experience, a knowing experience of being. So again, you're dropping in, you're dropping from the doing into being, and there isn't an object for your mind to grab onto there. So now it's an inherent knowing of being experiencing itself as itself, right? This is the definition of liberation or enlightenment, is when consciousness becomes aware of its own existence, or being rests in itself as itself. It knows itself directly as itself. Another way to say it is that it doesn't have to know anything other than itself to know itself. It knows itself just by being itself. They go on to say, there is a brief process of investigation from thought, feeling, or whatever object of perception that is turned away from that ends in a blank. I go on to say, what is aware that there is a blank? Turn to that which is aware of the blank. I have been confused about how to cling to the I because the answer to the investigation is nothing I can perceive. This is correct, I say. It is the sense of I, not the conceptual knowing of it. The sense is still an object, but as the sense drifts into self, it is transformed into an experience of being. They go on to ask, I'm wondering if it is possible that you are right, that the inquiry brings me back to my true self, but I may just not be aware of it and have become accustomed to thinking I am something perceivable, like a feeling of myself in the body. I go on to say, this is most likely the case, which is why it takes many sessions before you start to understand the difference between the experience of ego and the self. This still doesn't leave me a clear being to cling to, but I get the sense this is a silly attempt since being is primary. I say, in the end, being clings or attends to itself. Being knows itself just by being itself, which is another way of saying attention seats itself into itself. Does this process sound accurate? I go on to say, yes, this is the practice of self-investigation. This is self-enquiry. This is self-scrutiny. This is self-investigation. This person he's in the depths. He's doing it. And he just has some questions. And the more and more you, like this questioner, rest in your being, you will understand what this means. It won't be a conceptual understanding. You will know it inherently with your heart, with yourself. And there's nobody that does that. That's the clarity. This will all be happening on its own accord. So I encourage you to turn within. It's the only way back home to this clarity. And I am always here to help as much as I can.